Imagine winning a $50 million federal contract. I mean, you are popping the champagne, the whole team is celebrating, and then bam.
Yeah, reality hits.
Exactly. You realize you have 30 days to mathematically prove to the Defense Contract Audit Agency exactly how many cents of your company's electric bill went toward that specific project, or you don't get paid.
It's a complete cold sweat moment.
It really is.
Yeah.
That is the reality of the SF 1408 pre-award audit. You win the award, but before a single check is cut, the government basically moves into your guest bedroom, or your accounting department, rather, to verify exactly how, where, and why you spend every single penny.
Right, and it's a massive operational shock, especially for any business that's transitioning from the commercial sector.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We're treating this as a high-stakes business strategist session aimed specifically at you, the listener. Our mission today is to guide you through this exact transition, moving from being, a minor subcontractor to a major credible prime contractor without getting totally trapped in outdated compliance software.
Which happens a lot more often than you'd think.
Oh, absolutely. So the material driving our deep dive today comes from a stack of incredible sources from Daston Corporation. We are pulling from their DCAA on-demand suite app overview, their GovCon Essentials deep dive, their suiteapp.com listing, and their broader insights on government accounting compliance.
Yeah, and the central conflict we are exploring today is really how to survive that now what moment.
Right.
Because passing this SF 1408 audit, it elevates your business. It's a rite of passage to prime contractor status in Washington.
Right.
But trying to pass it using the wrong technology, that can trap a growing business in just a permanent state of administrative paralysis.
So let's start there. Let's define the friction of this SF 1408 audit. Because if I'm a listener, I might be thinking, hey, my standard business software knows I bought a $10,000 server. I have the receipt.
Yeah, a receipt is a receipt in the commercial world.
Right. So why does the government care about the existential why behind it?
Well, because in the commercial world, an invoice is just accepted at face value. You deliver the software, you get paid. But in the federal space, particularly with flexibly priced contracts like cost plus fixed fee or time and materials, the government is reimbursing your actual costs.
They aren't just buying the end product.
Exactly. They are funding your process. So they have an absolute fiduciary duty to the taxpayers to ensure they aren't accidentally absorbing your commercial operating expenses.
So if I buy that $10,000 server, standard software just tracks what I spent.
Right. It goes into a general IT expense bucket.
But the DCAA demands proof of where, why, and how it was used. They want to know, is that server exclusively for the Navy project, or is it running my entire corporate office?
Precisely. Because that completely changes who foots the bill. And to prove that split, the auditor uses the SF 1408 blueprint to test your system's structural logic.
Okay, let's demystify this blueprint.
Yeah.
Because the sources lay out these core non-negotiable requirements that standard software just completely fails at.
Yeah, and the first big one is explicit cost segregation.
Right.
Your system has to mathematically isolate direct costs, like, say, dedicated engineering hours for a specific contract, from indirect costs.
And indirect costs being things like corporate overhead, fringe benefits, G&A general, and administrative expenses.
Exactly.
Okay.
If your accounting system just dumps all IT hardware into a single bucket, the auditor cannot verify the government's share. The system itself has to demand a classification at the exact moment the purchase order is created.
Which, that introduces a massive vulnerability when it comes to human error, especially with what the government absolutely refuses to pay for.
Oh, the unallowables.
Right. The Federal Acquisition Regulation, FR Part 31, has this strict list of banned items: alcohol, entertainment, certain lobbying efforts.
Yeah, you cannot bill the taxpayer for your martinis.
Right. Which makes sense.
Yeah.
But let's look at the mechanics of a failure here. It's not just about an auditor catching one rejected receipt, is it?
No, it's way more dangerous than that. Let's say an executive takes a client to a $500 lobbying dinner. Yeah. And a junior accountant accidentally codes that meal into the general corporate overhead pool instead of flagging it as unallowable.
Okay, so $500 slips through.
But that $500 artificially inflates the entire indirect cost pool. So when the system calculates your overhead rate to apply to your contracts, that rate is now mathematically corrupted.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You end up overcharging the government by a tiny fraction on every single invoice across every single federal contract you hold.
Jeez. So the auditor isn't just looking for bad intentions or fraud. They are looking for structural leaks. You can't just rely on a manager promising, hey, I'll remember to pull the bar tab off my expense report.
Exactly. FAR Part 31 requires the accounting system to systematically filter those unallowable items out. They can never mathematically touch a federal bill or even influence an indirect rate.
And once you strip those out, you're left with a new math problem, right?
You are. Because once the unallowables are gone, you still have this massive pile of legitimate but vague indirect costs. Corporate rent, HR salaries, things like that.
How does the government know what fraction of the rent they're supposed to pay?
Well, that forces you to establish logical indirect cost pools. Your system has to dynamically calculate an equitable method to distribute those overarching costs across all your active projects.
Using actual target or provisional rates, according to the sources.
Right. And to make those dynamic calculations work, you need incredibly granular data points. Which brings us to the biggest failure point for growing government contractors.
Timekeeping.
Timekeeping.
So timekeeping can't just be a Friday afternoon guessing game anymore. I think I worked 40 hours this week.
Yeah, that's a one-way ticket to failing the audit. It sounds extreme, but you're moving from a casual diary to a strict legal deposition of your workday. Labor is usually the largest driver of costs on a federal project.
So end of week manual spreadsheets are just dead on arrival.
Completely. Under DCAA rules, employees have to log their hours daily, and they must assign those hours to specific final cost objectives, like the exact contract tasks.
But the tech hurdle isn't just the logging, is it? It's the audit trail.
Right. It has to be an immutable, unedited audit trail.
Let me give an example to see if I have this right. Let's say an engineer realizes on Thursday, oh wait, I accidentally billed 4 hours to the Navy project on Tuesday, but I was actually working on the Air Force project.
Happens all the time.
So how does a system track that retroactive change without making it look like we are, tampering with the books?
Well, a compliance system won't just let you overwrite the Tuesday entry. It has to permanently record the original entry, log the exact timestamp of the change, identify the user, and this is key, require a mandatory text field explaining the reason for the correction.
The auditor needs the entire forensic history of that one data point. Okay, looking at the sheer weight of these demands, the explicit cost segregation, the cascading indirect cost pools, systematic filtering, immutable daily timekeeping, I totally understand why executives panic.
It is incredibly intimidating.
It is. So the natural panic-induced reaction I see, and the sources talk about this, is executives running out to buy the oldest, strictest tool available.
The software trap.
Right. Because if the government's rules were written decades ago, shouldn't we use the software built exactly for those old rules? I mean, why fix what isn't broken? It feels like a safe bet.
It feels safe, but it is a massive mistake. Panicked executive teams rush to buy these decades-old GovCon-specific accounting tools, and they end up creating a secondary disaster.
How so?
Because these legacy systems isolate the federal practice from the rest of the company. They're built in a totally different technological era. They're closed loops.
So if you have a blended business, like you have a thriving commercial software division, and now you have this new federal contract, you've essentially broken your internal machinery in half.
You've built a massive data silo. These legacy systems have incredibly rigid, dated user interfaces. They lack modern open APIs.
Right.
So they literally cannot natively communicate with your CRM, your commercial billing software, or your modern payroll systems.
So you can't even support commercial or subscription-based product lines in the same system.
No, you really can't. You end up forcing your team to manually export data from your commercial operations and then bridge it over to the federal accounting software using offline Excel spreadsheets.
Oh man, a manual data bridge. That's where profitability just goes to die.
It really is.
So you might pass the audit, but you cripple your company's ability to grow commercially.
Exactly. You are paying massive administrative overhead just to manually translate data between two disconnected systems. The sources call it being locked in a compliance prison. You're cutting off one of your business's legs just to fit into the government's required pair of pants.
That is such a perfect way to put it. So since legacy software traps you in the past and basic software fails the audit outright, we need to introduce the ultimate middle ground.
The modern solution.
Right. Achieving federal compliance without sacrificing modern enterprise-grade scalability. And according to the sources, the definitive choice here is Oracle NetSuite partnered with Daston Corporation.
Yes. And this is where the conversation gets really exciting, because Oracle NetSuite is widely recognized as a world-class cloud ERP. It gives you the scalability and real-time visibility you need for the commercial side.
But out of the box, NetSuite isn't strictly tuned for a DCAA audit, right?
Right, and that is exactly the gap Daston fills. Daston is the premier NetSuite solution provider, and their DCAA on-demand suite app is it's the absolute right choice for new GovCons.
The sources really emphasize this idea of native logic, that Daston embeds DCAA-specific logic natively right inside NetSuite's core architecture. But let's unpack that, because every vendor claims they integrate.
Oh, totally.
Are we just talking about a slightly better data bridge here?
No, it's the exact opposite of a bridge. Think of a standard API integration like hiring a translator who has to run back and forth between two different rooms to relay messages.
Right, there's always a lag.
Exactly. Data gets misaligned, things break, the synchronization happens after the fact. Daston's native suite app is like teaching your core accounting system to speak the government's language fluently.
So the compliance rules are just built into the system's own vocabulary.
Yes. Daston's application is built entirely on NetSuite's proprietary Suite Cloud platform. It sits on the exact same database layer as the ERP. So when an employee enters a timesheet, the compliance check happens at the exact moment of data entry, not during some frantic end-of-month export.
There is no external software.
None. It is a seamless extension of the architecture.
That is incredible, and that structural integration unlocks what the sources call the 4 key operational superpowers.
I love that term.
Me too. Let's walk through them. Superpower number 1, automated indirect cost allocations. This directly solves that cascading math problem we talked about with the rent and the overhead.
Right, so instead of a stressed-out accountant trying to manually calculate fringe, overhead, and G&A on a Friday night using messy offline Excel sheets,
the system just handles it
automatically. Because Daston natively understands the SF 1408 requirements, it can handle infinite user-defined pools and process sequences dynamically. When you pay a bill, the system already knows how to slice the overhead and distribute it.
which has to completely change the speed of invoicing.
Oh, absolutely.
Which brings us to the second and third superpowers, because they're really linked. Native time and payroll tracking, and automated GovCon billing. Because the timekeeping happens natively inside NetSuite, the workflow forces the team to log the exact job codes and labor categories required by the contract.
And that data just flows without friction. The hours worked automatically tied directly to project billing.
Which eliminates revenue leakage.
Exactly. Generating invoices for cost-plus or time and materials contracts is notoriously complex. The government requires very specific public vouchers, like the SF 2035.
If you try to cobble an SF 2035 together manually, you are basically guaranteed to mess it up.
You'll forget to bill for legitimate, allowable costs, or the government will reject the invoice because it's formatted wrong, and then your cash flow is delayed for months.
But Daston perfectly calculates and generates those complex public vouchers automatically.
Natively from the daily data flow. Every cent of allowable direct and indirect cost is captured and billed accurately.
Okay, so that leads us to the fourth superpower. And honestly, this might be the most transformative one. A single source of truth.
This is where the true value of the data architecture really shines.
Because when the DCAA auditor inevitably knocks on the door, you don't have to scramble. You don't have to try and align your commercial data with your federal data.
Right, you just pull a clean, unedited ledger history in seconds. You give the auditor exactly what they want.
So instead of building a separate, ugly, windowless fortress just for the auditor, Daston basically installs a high-tech, invisible security system directly into the beautiful modern house you already live in.
That is a perfect analogy. Because satisfying the auditor and giving your CEO real-time metrics shouldn't require two separate systems. While the auditor is looking at their compliance reports, your executive team gets real-time dashboards showing true profitability, resource utilization, and cash flow across the entire enterprise.
The commercial side and the federal side all in one place.
All in one place.
Wow. Pulling this entire narrative together, compliance should never force your business backward into clunky legacy tech. Implementing NetSuite with Daston's DCAA on-demand suite app proves that you aren't just building a defensive wall to keep an auditor happy.
No, you are actively building a highly sophisticated financial foundation, one that is completely ready to scale through your next 10 prime contracts.
Which brings us to a final provocative thought for you to ponder long after this deep dive ends. We have spent this entire session focused on satisfying the rigorous demands of the federal government, right? But if this modern system makes tracking every single cent, every minute of labor and every fraction of overhead so seamless and profitable for your strict government work. How might adopting this level of rigorous, automated cost tracking completely revolutionize the profit margins of your commercial projects?
Oh, that's a great question.
I mean, even when the government isn't watching, having that kind of precision is a totally different ballgame.
When extreme precision becomes your operational baseline, unprecedented profitability inevitably follows.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of federal compliance. We'll catch you next time.